It's now time for this month's broadcast of Learning Now TV.
Welcome to the February edition of Learning Now Television. I hope you enjoy the show. Got three headline sections. The first is an interview with Michelle Ockers, who we caught in London. She's based in Sydney, Australia, and she was over for the Learning Technologies Conference. We've also got a panel session with Dutch professionals who we caught in London, having been at the Learning Technologies Exhibition and Conference. And finally, Owen Ferguson from Good Practice is talking about his 70-20-10 report. Enjoy the show. The Learning Technologies Conference every year is a real magnet for experts in L&D from all over the world to come into London. And we're trying to capture a few people before they disappear back to their home countries. And I'm really privileged to be talking today to Michelle Ockers. I've got a few minutes with her before she goes back to her home country, Australia, and our home base in Brisbane. So welcome, Michelle. It's very good of you to spend some time with me.
Thank you, Nigel. It's a pleasure to be here and have a conversation.
It is indeed. And your background, you have a military background where you're a real logistics person, kind of scary, I would imagine, when you were in your flow. You were then, when I first knew you, you were working for Coca-Cola Amatil in Australia as the L&D person, as the CLO. You're now working in a company of your own, working with lots of different organisations, but you've broadened your scope. You're not just an L&D person anymore. You're looking at the whole organisation development and the way learning fits into organisations. Would that be a fair summary?
I think that's a fair summary. I think learning and development teams can't work on their own anymore. We can't make a big enough impact for a whole stack of reasons, one of which is that the skill set that we require to do that, to have the kind of impact we want on performance, is so large now that it's very difficult, particularly in a small team, to have all of those skills. So you've got to orchestrate working with other parts of the organisation. And also I think because to achieve our goals, which these days is not just about learning, right? It's about performance and contributing to organisational performance. It's about being aligned to the organisational strategy and doing things that are relevant and make a difference. We don't own all of that. You know, we don't own the learning culture. We don't own all the bits and pieces that you need to pull together to really shift performance, but we've got a really important role to play.
Yes, I think that's absolutely spot on. Now, in my new book, I talk about looking up. You know, there's too much looking down in L&D, focusing on the minutiae instead of looking up at the big picture. And that's what you're helping organisations to do. That could kind of sum up your role in a way, helping them look up, helping pull in more than one piece of power in the organisation to achieve greater ends. So give us some examples, give us some concrete examples. How are organisations doing that? Galvanising learning to effect much better change, much better performance by incorporating learning within a whole range of other change mechanisms, whatever they might be.
I think innovation programs are a really example, and I did a piece of work with Qantas Airways in Australia, our flagship carrier, and I was with them for about 14 months helping to guide
wow,
a transformation
program. That's a long time.
It was a really interesting example where they weren't sure how many people were working in learning and development across their airline group, 9 airlines in the group. They weren't sure what they were doing. They weren't sure how much it was costing them or how effective they were being. So we kind of had to probe that first and understand that and then look for the opportunities. But some of those opportunities were beyond the formal boundaries of learning and development. And there were some people doing really interesting work, for instance, in the innovation space, in the customer experience space, outside the formal boundaries of learning and development, but to really have an impact, you needed to have learning happening and to orchestrate that. So communities of practice is a really interesting example. I really think there's tremendous value in communities of practice, and it was one of the big spaces I played in at Coca-Cola. But in many organisations, communities of practice are run outside of learning and development.
They're rarely run inside learning and development. They're seen as kind of specialist and out there. And what you're saying is they should be specialists and in here and seen as brilliant ways of moving learning across the organisation.
I actually think they're at the heart of learning. I think that in terms of like the mix of formal learning and informal learning and connecting people, there will always be a place for some level of formal learning. You have courses coming in, people coming into the organisation, need to accelerate them to a certain base level. But once you get to a certain level, it's about learning through connecting with others, through asking better questions, through helping people to solve problems. And if I want to understand how learning is actually happening in an organisation, I don't go up to people and say, tell me how you learn, because they invariably think about training and courses, because that's the way we're kind of indoctrinated through school and education.
And so many companies ask questions in the survey saying, are you happy with your learning? And what people interpret that as being is, how many courses have I been on? Not many. No, I'm not happy. It completely misses the point. You're absolutely right.
A lot of it's about connection to others.
It is.
So I will ask people, how do you solve problems?
Yes.
How do you get better at your work?
Yes.
Tell me about what you've improved in the last year and how you did that.
And what impact did that make?
Yeah,
the fact that you're better at your job.
That's right. And how can we help in connection with others in the organisation to create an environment that allows you to do more of the getting better?
Yes. And when you think of Qantas, they've got all these teams a long way from home base, many. That how do they share the knowledge? If you're a crew on an A380, what you really want to know is who solved that problem that we're now encountering on another A380, not it's all within our team. And that's where communities of practice, stretching people across the whole organisation, can make that huge impact. So did you set up communities of practice, or did you just galvanise them in Qantas? Was it new to them, or did they kind of have it but not quite well organised enough?
The innovation team was doing a lot with communities of practice around innovation, around specific innovation themes. Interestingly, you should mention flight crew. That was one of the areas where there was the most active natural community which had grown on Yammer. People talking about issues, challenges, how they solved them. I had a customer who had this issue and here's what I did. At Coca-Cola Amatil, we grew communities. We grew strategic communities aligned to specific outcomes that the organisation was working on.
Yes.
Yeah.
And therefore, do you see that as a kind of enduring vehicle? If you're going to promote learning, if you're going to make it more effective, the essence of that is building strong learning communities.
Absolutely. And that's where I focus a lot of my work now, is around connection, it's around discovery, and it's not just around connection within the organisation, but helping people to develop. Learning agility is a bit of a buzzword, but I think being able to go beyond the boundaries of your organisation, beyond the boundaries of your discipline, and connect with others, new ideas, others who have similar problems, either in your industry elsewhere or in different industries. I think there's a lot you can discover, create, bring back into the organisation and adapt in that way.
I agree with you. I think that's absolutely right. So someone's watching this in an organisation where they're not strong in all of these things. What would you give them? Where do you start? What is the starting point? Where do you start if you go into a new organisation? Give us a tip.
So if I go into a new organisation, I start by trying to understand what is this organisation for? What's its purpose? And how does it do that? So going out and talking to people. For me, I would go out and talk to business leaders. I would find subject matter experts. I would ask, who are you connected to? Who do you talk to? What does your job matter? What do you do in your job that makes a difference? So really get deep into the organisation before I start thinking about how can I serve these people and serve the organisation is where I would start.
Yes, and that's a good message for an L&D team. Don't start with what course can we give them.
Yeah, no.
Start by understanding what the needs are, and start by looking at how you can increase impact and performance. They're the kind of two key words in town, aren't they? No one cares about anything else.
Yeah.
It's great to talk to you, Michelle. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate
Nigel.
it.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much.
People have got to have a far broader vision than they've ever had in the past, and that's something that's got to be developed all the way through the organisation.
very important to create learning experiences that are social, that are collaborative, and adapted to a real-world context.
Pitching our leadership course recently, the response was, we get it. You're not about teaching a few leadership techniques, you're about transforming the organisation. And that's right. Imagine an organisation where people are energised and motivated by being in control of what they do. Imagine they're trusted and given freedom to absolutely work at their best. Imagine they have managers who coach them rather than tell them what to do. Wouldn't you like to work in that environment? That's what we can help you create through our leadership programs to develop the skills, and through our consultancy to help you with your processes and the things you need to change. That's happy. We can help you create a truly happy, productive place.
This month, we've decided to have another panel session, and we're focusing on young people's perspective on the world of work and the world of learning. But this time, we've got two guests from Holland. They've come over for the Learning Technologies exhibition, and we're capturing them before they return back to their home country. Welcome Jasper and welcome Marit.
Thank you.
Very nice of you to come and join us in the studio. So Jasper, tell us first of all, who do you work for?
Thanks for having us.
That's a
my
pleasure.
name is Jasper Schoonenberg. I work for the global franchisor of the IKEA concept. The company is called IKEA Systems. And I work there as a learning designer.
Right, okay, learning designer at IKEA Concept. Marit, what do you work for? Who do you work for?
Yes, I am Marit de Vries. I work for Maandag and Woohoo. We are a recruitment agency based in the Netherlands, Germany, Belgium and Poland. We're expanding and I work in Rotterdam for them as program manager learning and development and also bit designing.
Okay,
Yeah.
so both kind of, can I use the word funky companies?
Yes.
Both interesting, unusual companies with a really good message. So I assume that you're not a traditional recruitment company.
No, otherwise we
No.
wouldn't be called Woohoo.
No, you would not be called really.
Maandag is in English it's Monday, so yeah,
Right.
it's not
Right,
traditional.
Okay. Woohoo Monday.
Yeah.
Great. Excellent. Okay. And you're promoting the kind of IKEA message around staff and culture. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so IKEA is a franchise concept.
Yes.
So what we do from our perspective is we provide learning solutions to support the franchisees in...
So let's start to get a sense of your world. How do you learn? How both of you, start with you, Marit. How do you learn? You're involved in learning,
Yeah.
but how do you learn?
Well, I think I'm the typical generation that learns by doing. I really love to search for things by myself, YouTube, or play games and just figure it out. So, for example, if I have to make an IKEA closet, I will reach for YouTube or just do it instead of read how to.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you're not going to sign up for a course to learn how to put an IKEA cabinet together, are you?
No, I wouldn't. No.
And what about your digital life? Do you use are you addicted to your phone? Is your phone your main medium of communication?
Yes, it is. Yeah, I am really addicted, and I also love, you have like the podcast opportunities, apps, YouTube, and I love to design it and I love to use it. So that's what I use in my work life, but also in my personal life a lot.
Okay, Jasper, what about you? Similar?
Similar, yes, absolutely. What I like a lot is reading articles to keep myself up to date. And I think there's some interesting things there about, many people ask me, can you forward some articles or things that you find interesting around our profession? But then I tell them, like every time I read an article myself, it is relevant at that moment because at that moment I need to get something done. Yeah. So I search for things that I need at that moment. A week later it might be less relevant because I'm not in that context and in that situation anymore.
Or a week later it's too late.
Exactly. Yeah. So I always would like to inspire people actually to search for their own articles and inspiration in the format they prefer to solve the problem that they have at that moment. Yeah.
So you build a personal learning environment, you look for stuff just for you, just in time, just right in terms of quantity. So why are you doing learning design? Why are you necessary in the world?
I think it's a very good question. I like to make people happy, and the thing is that I enjoy my work a lot, and what I would like to do is give as many people as possible the opportunity to enjoy their work as well. I think gives a lot of self-confidence as well. If you do a good job, if you get positive feedback, if you can grow in your work life and in your personal life, and I think it's a wonderful thing that we as L&D professionals can contribute to that.
Okay. So, Merit, where are you going in your career? You're not going to. I don't think you're thinking, well, I'll probably be with this company till I'm 62, and then.
No.
Where do you see your career? What is this company giving you in terms of your skills and career?
What it gives me is a lot of freedom. And for
Yes.
example, I choose this company because I wanted some sort of company with a lot of freedom, a lot of, trust, and they give me that, and that's what I really need. So I think that's the red thread in my whole career is that I need some trust and some ownership to do. So that's what I'm looking for. And I really love all the new opportunities that we have these days.
And they're giving you skills as well. You're learning new skills. as well.
And I can learn it in a way that fits me.
Fits you, suits you, yes.
So, for example, last week I followed a course about branding. Was it necessary for my job at that moment? No, but I thought that it would help me as a person, and I said, just go for it.
Yes.
Just follow it.
Yes.
And
it's your personal portfolio.
yeah, and it's perfect, and that's what I really love also about the L&D work. It's also normal in our work to provide it, but sometimes it's also good to see what we need by ourselves as professionals. Yeah.
So I would guess that you can't see any point in the future where you're not learning new skills. You're never going to say, well, I've made it now. I'm a this or I'm a that. You're always going to be looking for new things, new opportunities.
Yeah.
So how long would you stay in a job, do you think? 2 years, 3 years, 6 months?
Well, I'm kind of a job hopper.
Right, okay.
If I feel that there's another opportunity that...
You'll move?
Yeah, I will move. So I will stay there as long as I...
There's opportunity?
Yeah.
And if there's better opportunity?
And I hope that's maybe it's going to be for 10 years.
Yes.
It could be. I mean,
Yes.
there are companies that offer you so much and give you so much
Yes.
freedom and space.
But it's reciprocal. They have to give you something for you to give them your loyalty and your trust. Okay, what about you, Jasper? You're not a lifelong career person in one organisation, or are you?
I that's the thing, I really trust my feelings in that,
Okay.
If I go to work and I'm happy and I get the right energy, I get the opportunity to have an impact,
Yes.
then I enjoy it.
Yes.
And sometimes we're talking about what are you doing in 3 years. Actually, I don't know. We'll see, if you get the opportunities and if you get the opportunity to make the impact that you're looking for, then why would you change it? Why would you do something else?
Yes.
But take it as it comes. Yeah.
Yeah, what you said about impact, I think that's for me also a very important one. Feel that I can make impact, that I can create something that makes the company better. And if that's there, then it's perfect.
You're there, and if it's not, you're away.
Yes.
But Dan Pink said that motivation was all about autonomy, mastery, and purpose.
Yeah.
And that seems to be exactly what you're saying, that you want to have some autonomy, some ability to operate independently. You want to do things well and learn new skills, but you want to do it in the context of having a good reason for doing it, a purpose in your life, a purpose in helping the company, and also to work for companies that are doing something useful in the world. And both of you work for companies doing something useful in the world. Is that a fair summary?
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good. Okay. So what are your hopes for the future? What do you want work to be moving forward? How do you want things to change in the world? Start with you, Merit. How do you want things to change?
Oh, well, what I really want, and I hope that I can add some value to that, is that for nowadays in some companies we see learning and development as some sort of island. That's learning and development.
Yes.
They have their own space.
Yes.
And I think,
set aside in the corner.
Exactly.
Yes.
And I hope that we can create a movement for now in 10 years that learning and development is just a solid rock in the organization, and you need it.
So at the heart of the organisation, not down there in the corner.
Yeah, and I think it should be part of HR.
Yes.
It's important how many salary you get. It's important how many vacancy days you get, and it's also important that there's some development for you in the job.
Yes.
And I hope that I can add value in making that transformation in companies.
And you see those three things equally important. You see, obviously, you need a decent salary. Secondly, you need vacation time, you need time off.
Yes.
And thirdly, you need the ability to learn. They're almost equal. Do you see them? Is that right?
Yeah, and I hope that there comes a time that people will say, okay, well, I don't have, I can't develop myself there, so I will search for another company.
Yes.
And I think that's a good thing, you know.
I do too. I think it's a great thing. And therefore, you're staying with an organisation where you're giving value.
Exactly.
And where you're not, you're going away. So that's good for you. It's also probably good for the organisation as well.
I hope so, yeah,
new people
of
coming
course.
through.
Yeah.
What about you? Aspirations for work in the future?
Good question. What I'm super curious about and what I would love to see is that we give young professionals the space and the trust to flourish. Because what I really believe in is that we have a lot of great talent out there nowadays. I mean, people study longer than they used to do in the past. They get opportunities, people get curious, they get challenged during their studies, being at universities. But when they come into organizations, it is super important that they get the trust from, especially the first manager. That's something that I experienced myself, that you get the space to explore and to get the positive feedback. You know, give it a try. If you fail, learn from it and continue going. Because that's a way, I think, how young professionals can have an impact on the organization.
Yes.
Not looking at the age, but looking at the things that they can
What
bring.
they can do.
Yeah.
There used to be a kind of mantra in work that when you started your job, you shut up for the first 5 years.
Exactly.
And then
Yeah.
finally you reached a point where people would listen to you. That's completely irrelevant now, isn't it? It's completely redundant. If you're not given some space, if you're not given trust, if you're not given things to really do, you're away. You're gone. You're gone.
And I think an important thing is also the place. It's okay to make failure. It's
Yes.
okay,
Yes.
but get up afterwards.
Yes.
And
you need a culture that
yeah.
doesn't punish you for failure,
Exactly.
but learns from failure.
and indeed a manager that gives you the time.
Yes.
And
Yes. And turns mistakes into learning opportunities.
exactly.
Absolutely.
So you get better at what you do. And when you get better, the whole organisation gets better. Is collaborative and communal life in the organisation important? Is it important to be part of a group of people who you respect and like and kind of score off and learn from? Is that, it's not all about being on your own and it's all about me? Am I right?
So yes, I think that's really important, and especially the culture in the organization. Because I think we cannot rely on the knowledge anymore for 10 years like we did in the past. I mean, things are changing. So it's super important that you have the right people in the organization that contribute and that fit into the culture, into the values of the organization, so that you can actually search for each other, use each other's positive energy, build on each other, rather than, I think in the recruitment process, focus only on the experience that people have or the knowledge that
And
people
skills
have.
and competencies.
Exactly.
So it's recruit for attitude, build the knowledge and skills later,
Exactly.
if necessary. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's excellent. So one little tip, so that if you have a generation coming just behind you, what would you say to your junior peers about as they begin to think about work? One tip for them. Merit, start with your tip.
I would say don't be afraid and trust the knowledge that you have and dare to say, hey, I'm here, I think I know better. And in some organizations, you know, you have those seniors and they just worked a lot of years in another environment. Everything changes so fast. But it's important to say, I'm here and I know what to do. Let me tell you, let me see. So don't be afraid. And if people don't think in the same way, they will tell you, and that's okay, because then you have a discussion. Yeah.
Great. Jasper.
I would say the tip from my side would be not to focus too much on the tools. Think about what you can achieve and how the tools can enable you to create a great learning environment and great learning experiences. Because when I look back in my days when I was studying, we had those great tools, and they were quite complex to use 4 or 5 years ago. When I see the tools that we have nowadays, I mean, it becomes easier and easier and easier. So don't focus too much on mastering these tools, but focus more on how to utilize these tools in order to create a good learning experience for the people in your organization. Yeah.
2 great tips, and I really enjoyed talking to you. And I have to say, if there's anybody watching this program who doesn't take note of what you're saying, woe betide the future of their organizations. Woe betide. You embody a kind of spirit and an energy and an attitude that I think most organizations would love to be able to bottle. And I love the idea that work is a two-way process. It's what you can give, but also what they can give, what work can give you. It's a two-way process. So that was a fantastic, excellent and very lively conversation, and I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Whoever you are, wherever you're from, you can network with professionals and experts on the award-winning DPG community.
You can choose to look at articles, videos, podcasts. You can look at comments that people have made. I find it my first stop when I'm thinking about L&D. If I have a question or I want to learn more, that's the first place I go.
Just head online and search for DPG community and sign up free today.
There's a huge debate going on about the difference between evaluation and impact measurement, how we evaluate, if we should evaluate, whether there should be some kind of cash basis to our measurements. And Robin Hoyle has waded right into the debate. And Robin is going to discuss with us what is impact, how do we measure it, and how do we report it back to the organisation. It's fascinating stuff.
Have you ever been asked to conduct an ROI study, return on investment? It's one of those cyclical, perennial issues in learning and development, isn't it? Comes round every so often and it's flavour of the month and then disappears again to suddenly emerge sometime later, phoenix-like, to be the issue that's on everybody's lips. One of the challenges on return on investment is whenever it comes round, I ask what that means. What do people actually want to calculate? Now, when people were first introducing e-learning modules, it was simple. All the return on investment studies showed was that it was cheaper doing it via e-learning than it was by putting people into a classroom. Job done, you'd think. Of course, no one asked the very pertinent question, which was, wouldn't it be even cheaper if we just cancelled this entire programme? Nobody worried about whether or not it worked any better than the version that we had before. And by any better, I mean, did it actually change performance? That has to be part of a return on investment study, doesn't it? On one side, we've got all the costs associated with learning intervention, whether that's putting people in a classroom, hiring trainers, looking at venue hire, all of those things. Time off the job being one of the biggest costs. And of course, people go, oh, well, we do all of our learning in the workflow now, but that's not cost-free either. Because if we're getting people to do things differently, inevitably there will be a loss of productivity as they master their new skills and try new things out. And so we should assume that all learning interventions have some cost in terms of the people involved and the opportunity cost of them not being able to do the things quite as well as they would otherwise do them while they are going through that learning and development process. So we've got a cost, and on the opposite side of the balance sheet, we would hopefully have some benefits, not just cost savings, but actually real improvements in performance expressed in financial terms. In other words, people are able to do more things more quickly, more of the time. Now, when I look at return on investment, because it's difficult to get all of that financial information, particularly as an external consultant, although clients may say, we want an ROI study, as soon as you start asking them for specific figures, they suddenly become very coy about that. So I've stopped even trying to do ROI studies that are proper, robust and appropriate to the issues concerned. But I'm still keeping on with the idea of looking at impact studies. And when we talk about impact studies, we first of all turn to Brinkerhoff. And Brinkerhoff defined impact as having a positive effect on one or more KPIs or business objectives, which is directly attributable to a specific learning intervention. In other words, did it work? Did it enable people to do things which they needed to do? And can we measure that against the only four measures which matter, which are quality, quantity, cost, or time? And how do we assess that? How do we get to the nub of that? Well, the first thing that I would recommend is that we define what people need to be able to do to fulfill their KPIs on business objectives. And as soon as we start talking in those terms, of course, we don't have any disconnect between organisational strategy and learning intervention, because our focus is on KPIs. It's really important that people are able to do this. Therefore, let's focus learning and development interventions around them being able to do it better, more quickly, more effectively at lower cost. And once we've defined what those things are that we need people to do, we can then benchmark our group who are going to go through the learning intervention. And I benchmark in two ways. The first is to ask how confident they feel about the different tasks and activities which make up the work that they do. And then I also ask them to prioritise a series of topics or areas that we're going to cover within a learning intervention, and tell me whether or not those are of high importance or lesser importance for them to develop those. So then I've designed essentially a learning intervention against those priority areas. And sometime later, I usually use about 3 months, but obviously it's situation dependent. We go back and we ask the same questions. The confidence measure is really important because I define confidence as part of competence. If I say that competence is the confidence to undertake a task repeatedly to a given standard, you can see confidence is pretty important. So I want to check whether or not people's confidence has gone up in the intervening period, having been involved in the intervention. And very often, of course, it doesn't. Even when confidence does rise slightly, it doesn't rise stratospherically. What we find is that very often it plateaus or it's slightly higher, and on occasions it reduces, because the first time we asked people whether they were confident, it was potentially an uninformed opinion. They didn't have any benchmark or standard against which to judge themselves. They didn't necessarily know what good looked like. So how could they tell how good they were going to be at it? Once they've now learned what we mean by good, what the standard is that we want people to achieve, what's possible, what their peers are doing, then we get a sense of their real confidence, and sometimes it's dropped off, and we need to support them at that point of drop-off. And then we look again at the priority areas, only this time I'm not asking what ranking they would give them, what's the most important and least important for them to learn more about. What I'm actually doing at that stage is saying, so you've now learned about this, has this had a negative or a positive impact on your performance? And giving people the opportunity to say a negative impact is really important, because sometimes people find unlearning or changing their behaviour really, really difficult. And rather than giving them new opportunities and new ways of working, it actually creates a sense of confusion and they can't move forward. Sometimes giving people a learning intervention which asks them some fundamental questions about the way they do things can cause people to slip backwards rather than to progress. And again, it gives us another opportunity to identify individuals and areas where we need to give more support. But if we do get people saying that they've had a significant or moderate positive impact on their performance, then we can ask them to describe what that looks like, what it feels like. What does that mean? Why have you said that's a significant improvement? Tell me more about that. And we would also interview a few of those individuals. We'll ask for volunteers. We're not interested in people being pressed into some kind of interrogation. But if people are prepared to share their stories with us, then let's try and quantify what that positive impact was. Now, again, that might be monetary terms, but it could be in terms of improved outcomes in other ways. Improved outcomes for patients, improved outcomes for clients, improved speed of delivery and implementation of a particular project, for example. So we want to look at where that impact is having real benefit. And then when we share that information with people, we can make some recommendations. And that's my big thing around impact studies is I don't expect every project to be absolutely perfect. All of them have opportunities where we could do it better. And looking at it at that point means that we can go back to the project group and say, hey, we found a few other things that we could do here. Are you interested? Can we convince you, using the data that we've gathered of the impact that the program's had so far, to invest a little bit more in trying something else, giving us a chance to go back to those individuals and maybe refresh, re-enthuse, get people to do some different activities, really to push home the advantage of the initial investment. Now, does that give us a neat percentage figure on a return on investment? No, it doesn't. Does it give us a constant striving to get better at what we do? Yes, it does. And given that that's what I hope L&D people are asking the people with whom they work to do every day, then I think it's only appropriate that we take some of our own medicine.
I'm delighted to welcome Martin Cousins back for another bit of a spar over another great research report. And this month we've picked the Fosway report, which was from data gathered in and around learning technologies. Now, 800 companies looking at the impact of learning technologies. And the bottom line is pretty bleak. What is the bottom line, Martin?
Well, it's not all bleak.
All right, okay.
But I'll give you a couple of numbers which would make you go, oh my word, things aren't so good. In terms of impact, only 14% of respondents say they effectively measure the impact of learning.
That is quite a dramatic
14.
figure. 14%.
1-4, not 40,
Right.
and that would have
No,
been
no.
bad. And interestingly, when you unpick it, and this research has got really, really good data in it,
Yes.
so you can unpick and go deeper into the sort of headlines like that one.
I do enjoy the Fosway stuff. I think it's all really relevant.
Yeah.
And I'd be appalled if there's anyone watching this programme who isn't reading the Fosway material.
So there's an endorsement. But interestingly, the measuring employee participation is the #1 measure of impact and value.
Yes.
Now, so that's a problem as well.
It's a huge problem.
You can't measure what people are doing and say that is going to give you the measure of impact and value.
We're no further forward, really, than ridiculous Kirkpatrick levels 1 and 2.
So this is digital learning, everyone.
Yeah.
You know, let's remind ourselves it's 2019, and yes, people are measuring what people are doing with the their click-throughs and all that kind of stuff. But you know, the idea that we might be looking at whether there's been any kind of impact on someone's performance seems to elude everyone.
It does.
Or 86% of the respondents to this survey.
And this is why there is still frustration in organisations with L&D who don't seem to get it, when everyone else is focused on performance, apart from L&D, who are focused on click-throughs, the number of people involved, how rapidly they got through the material. Nothing to do with impact.
Yeah,
Nothing to do with impact.
So I'm slightly concerned that I'm going to sit here and give you a whole load of numbers that make you think, oh dearie me.
There
But
must be
however,
some better news in there, Martin.
Well,
There
we'll
must
come
be.
to that. We'll
Okay.
come to that.
All right.
So I think the next one, and this I saw David Wilson and David Perring from Fosway deliver this presentation at the Learning Technologies Conference, and it was really good. And this one really got me. So when asked, do you think your current learning platforms are fit for the modern workforce? 34% yes, 16% said don't know, and 50% said no. Right, so David Wilson on stage says, why does L&D buy technology that stands a 50% chance of being good?
Yes.
And for me, that was the question of the Learning Technologies Conference.
Yes.
And that is astonishing.
It is astonishing. It is astonishing.
There's such low expectation.
Yeah, last month you were talking about procurement and IT, and I think that's a little bit to do with it. People are being forced down a path that they don't really want to go down, and the result is widespread employee disillusionment and disinterest, disengagement as a result.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the survey shows that 68% of respondents are currently in digital transformation. of learning.
Yes.
25% are still planning it. So 25% aren't doing it, which is quite interesting in 2019.
It is.
So it's happening. But also the other kind of weird thing here is that pretty much across the board, the data shows that more people are not doing things than doing them. And that we're talking about micro-learning, VR, curation, video. You know, more of them aren't doing it than are doing it. Now, these are the things that the big, you know, this is where it's all going.
Yes.
This is what they'd like to be doing.
Yes.
But currently...
But this is where it's all been going for a number of years. None of this stuff is brand spanking new. Wow. This is standard work in the workplace. Standard output. So, and yet it's not happening.
And I need to get the bad stuff out of the way, right?
Yeah,
so
okay.
I'll carry on a bit on riffing on that. Satisfaction with digital learning platforms, not great. Less than 40% rate their LMS and authoring tools as good or very good.
Yes.
Now, how about this one? This I just couldn't believe this. Less than 10% of people are satisfied with their learning experience platform. Now, these are the new generation of platforms that are going to provide lots of engagement, which is the number one thing that L&D is looking for, is learner engagement. This is what these platforms are offering, and the people that are buying them are not getting
the results they want. Yes.
From their purchase.
Yes. Do you think that's teething problems? That these things have got to sort themselves out, basically?
Who knows? But I think it's definitely buyer beware. I mean, when you see data like that, I would be starting to scratch around and look at...
And not swallow the Kool-Aid.
Well, no, I'd look at the customers that are buying this stuff, and I'd be talking to them and saying, okay, so I've heard this number here. What is going on for you? Is that working? Maybe it is a teething issue. Maybe they are new, but maybe they're just not solving the problems that need to be solved.
Or it's more complex than would be apparent.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But I think
let's have some good news, please, Martin.
There was one slide that the two Davids put up in their presentation. That was about what L&D is investing in and what they would like to see from their content and their platforms. That was more blended video, user-generated content, micro-learning, performance support. They want to use channels such as social and virtual. All of that, there's a real emphasis on doing more of that. And there is more investment. The respondents say they're getting more investment to invest in digital learning. So actually the picture is a very positive one in the sense of, we'd like to be doing a lot more of that kind of stuff that should lead to more engagement and better impact. But clearly there are massive questions around the effectiveness of current technology and actually measuring the impact of that technology.
Yeah, I think that's right. So basically what we can take is that the current state of play is not good, but investment is going in and things look like they'll start to move in the future. I think everybody should read this report. It's really insightful, and it's also a kind of reality check too. And it helps you benchmark your own organisation. So it may make people who feel deeply depressed quite happy that they're at least on the move and going to get there. Martin, thanks for your time and thanks for that interesting discussion.
Thank you.
In the L&D world, we all know our biggest challenge is knowledge fade and demonstrating ROI from our training interventions. At Elephants Don't Forget, we use artificial intelligence to guarantee that what you train your employees, they learn and retain. If you are looking to transform the impact your training content has on your business, improve the ROI, and perhaps help employees learn and retain even the dull regulatory material, drop me a line at nelly@elephantsdon'tforget.com.
There will be a revolution next few years probably in how we do learning. I think AI is going to completely redefine what learning is in our organizations.
The L&D team is going to have a much wider role. Individuals, as I see it, will become much more the centre.
Number one is personalisation. Number two, artificial intelligence. And number three, learning analytics.
Learning design needs to be more like game design.
Customers are looking for bigger business impact from the investments that they're making in learning.
We're looking to provide a consumer-grade experience for learning content.
We wanted to create something that was truly bite-sized.
We're looking at things like AI, we're looking at things like curated content, and we're trying to work with our customers to build those technologies into our products.
Too much content, they have a lack of data insight, that digital transformation needs to happen in the organisation. So what we help them do is to really provide the curation expertise, but also the technology to do that.
Putting people and their teams in the driver's seat of their own development experience, in combination with trying to align with the company's business goals.
There are some really key capabilities that we think LXP should have. That isn't just about being mobile or having search, but go deeper into how to deliver self-directed learning.
There's some opportunities for some fascinating data analytics.
How do you use evidence to make the right decisions to support your workers, your culture, your managers?
With the evolution of some of the solutions, the ability to start to create a connection between business data and learning data is becoming clearer.
Looking at how we can measure the effectiveness of interventions, look at the business impact, and then look at how we can use that to inform what we're providing.
It's Valentine's Day 2019 and we at Nimble are here to spread the e-learning love and let learning and development personnel know how they can create their own e-learning programs.
We have an integrated product now that includes the traditional Gomo authoring, Gomo video, and integration with Rustici software for e-learning delivery.
We're using YouTube for almost everything. So what we try to do is to replicate the way we learn at home in the office environment.
We're the first next generation language learning platform for the digital workplace.
We have chosen to take a position in the market which is really focused on the end learner. As learning professionals, what we are trying to do is to improve the learning experience, to improve engagement.
Most systems just look at the ones and the zeros. Have you done it? Haven't you done it? Ours actually looks below the surface. If you haven't done it, how persistent offender are you, which is really important with compliance.
It's something that really showcases exactly what unicorn training is all about, which is excellent content created by a specialist team, bang on for financial services.
It's all about giving an exceptional experience for our clients. In order to do that, we've really got to go in deep with their business, with their issues, and really come up with creative ways to solve those problems.
We're working more closely with customers than we ever have to not just switch the technology on, but to implement it, embed it, and stay with the customer to deliver that long-term future value.
We've come to market now with the merged organization of Net Dimensions and PeopleFluent into one integrated talent suite.
We're here to talk about some of the new partnerships that we have. We've got a fantastic LMS that we're working with.
We will build you classroom materials for face-to-face instruction as well as online courses, virtual reality, augmented reality, business simulations.
Learning is the next challenge for this century.
My name's Adam Harwood, I'm a digital learning partner at ASOS. If you're looking for a learning tool that will really influence what people are doing and make a real difference, then look no further than Loop. These guys genuinely know what they're doing and it's really helped me improve and develop as a digital learning partner. Get involved with Loop today.
I'm really pleased to be talking to Owen Ferguson, the Managing Director of Good Practice, about their latest research report, which is called The Evolution of 70-20-10. Note the word, the evolution of 70-20-10. And I was lucky enough to be in Australia, so I helped launch the report in Melbourne and Sydney, while almost simultaneously, although we got there first, Owen was London doing something similar. So first of all, welcome. Thank you for coming along. Now, what can you summarise in a couple of sentences? What is the evolution of 70-2010? What were the conclusions that the report drew?
Sure. 70-20-10 itself is a really simple concept.
It is.
It's basically just a reminder that there is more to
learning than formal courses.
Exactly,
Yes.
exactly. But there's lots of criticisms of 70-20-10 out there. It's not all about the, if it's not all about the numbers, why are they there in the title?
Yes.
People are using it in a really prescriptive manner. But what we found is that learning leaders understand the criticisms. They do things to mitigate the risks posed by some of the riskier areas, but they find that 70-20-10 is a really powerful model for driving change in the organisation, and they are making that happen. But what we are seeing are variations appearing within organisations in terms of how they brand it, how they communicate it, and how they're using it to drive change, and how quickly they're using it to drive change.
And some aren't even calling it 70-20-10, are they?
Exactly. So the most common rebranding we're finding is the experience, exposure, education branding for it. But that's not necessarily the only one. Some organisations aren't necessarily explicitly referring to it externally within the organisation at all. They're using it as a focus for within their learning and development.
Yeah, so it's
function.
kind of hidden. They're just
hidden.
doing it
They're
without needing to brand it or talk about it loudly.
Exactly. And some have just developed their own branding for communicating into the external organisations. Some companies are explicitly saying how they're going to change things, and they're running roadshows to explain the concept throughout the organisation. And as you say, some organisations are just doing it behind the scenes, and they're making that change happen in a slower, more gradual way.
But your perception is that model, whatever we call it, is actually got huge traction in organisations now.
Absolutely. So it is there. It is being used. It is. We found something in the range of 3/4 of organisations were using it to inform their,
which is
their
remarkable.
strategy. It
in
really
a very
is.
relatively short amount of time, it's gone from nowhere or being curiously interesting to being basically mainstream. I guess that's what the report is saying. The evolution. It's now gone straight into the vast majority of learning organisations, and it's just the way we do things.
Absolutely. And the question is, how are organisations adapting it and using it on the ground to enact change within their own, both their function and the organisation?
Yes. Have you got any examples of how organisations are adapting it to fit?
Sure, but the experience exposure education is
one of them.
Is just one of the examples. But organisations are using it to change the way that they design their interventions as a whole. So they're using the sort of the three elements of it as different lenses to look at particular problems to solve them. As I mentioned previously, some organisations are using it to get people within the organisation. It's not always about changing the mindset of people within L&D. In fact, most people tend to get it. It's about changing the mindsets of the stakeholders and the wider employee population. And so how they're communicating it and reminding people that it's not just a case of get yourself on the course and you've had some learning and development, but the learning opportunities and experiences are everywhere, and building in time for reflection, giving people structures and ways that they can collect that reflection and enact on it within conversations perhaps with their managers. So there's a whole range of activities going on. 70-20-10 itself is just the key driver for a lot of that.
Yes. So what you're saying is that it's a nudge for internal L&D to adjust their practice to take account of that, and it's a very useful vehicle for convincing the rest of the organisation that the shape of learning in the organisation needs to change and needs to reflect a much more holistic approach than simply drive them down courses, smack them into e-learning.
Yeah.
It's a much more interesting and complex view of learning in organisations. If you look at the report, if you take it overall, do you think the picture is one of optimism, steady progress, or the whole thing stalled and what are we going to do next?
Yeah, it's definitely optimistic. And I have to say, when I first went into this, I did have an awful lot of empathy with the criticisms were out there, because I'm sure you have had as well. I've had a lot of conversations with people working in L&D where it's seemed like 70-20-10 was being used in a very rigid way. But what has happened over the years is that greater appreciation for the subtleties in there has definitely developed. So it is it's being used and it's have a very positive impact. So there are lots of criticisms out there, there are lots of naysayers, but the people who are doing it, who are running L&D functions in mid to large size organisations are saying, we understand that. However, it's an incredibly powerful driver of change within our organisations. It shifts mindsets, and we are seeing tangible results from that. We are seeing cultural shifts in how people think about and talk about learning, not just within learning and development, but within right across the organisation.
And that's really important, isn't it? So in other words, it's shifted from being a crutch, some way of justifying your existence and creating a kind of rigid framework, which ultimately doesn't mean anything, to being a scaffolding. It's a way of approaching the world of learning and a way of enabling better conversations in L&D and way better conversation in the organisation as a whole. That's the evidence you seem to be pointing to, is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if more than anything else, it's almost more of a communications tool to help shift people's mindsets. So
Yes.
it is being used by L&D functions as a range of lenses to view what their activity is, but more than anything else, it's a really powerful marketing tool. It's the reason why it has spread so fast. It's got an almost meme-like quality. And
that's very true.
Yeah,
it's very true.
Its transmission medium are the minds of the L&D population, and it's gone through the whole of the L&D population has now started to filter out even further. And that's the sign of something of a powerful, simple idea.
An enduring idea. So the thing you said at the beginning was that it's so straightforward. It's easy to grasp. That's its power. And what you want to do is use that as a springboard, not as a kind of oppression. We've got to do it this way. It's actually a way of thinking about learning, and you jump from there into a completely different way of dealing with learning and a different way of delivering learning and a different way of measuring learning as well.
Yeah.
That's all good news, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's an incredibly powerful tool for getting stakeholders on board.
Yes.
So senior leaders, non-L&D leaders in the organisation get it, they understand it, and they say, crack on. Let's see what we can do by doing something different. But at the same time, show us the results of this different activity that you're doing.
Yes, yes. So then there's an impact conversation.
Yeah.
But let's just finish there and say that this report is free to download from the Good Practice website, and thousands of people have done so already, and I hope that this interview will prompt a few thousand more to do it. It's well worth reading, it's beautifully designed, it's a lovely looking report, and the message is an enduring and important one. So Owen, thank you very much for making the time to talk to me today.
Great, thank you very much, Nigel.
It's a pleasure. I hope you enjoyed the show. Next month, I'll be joined by a new presenter. I'm really looking forward to that. So I'll see you next month.